Hello, NaNoWriMo. We are here today to talk about revision. I am Grant Faulkner, Executive Director of NaNoWriMo, and I'm in our wondrous NaNoWriMo office here. And we're going to talk about revision. Yeah, so thank you so much for attending this webcast. And this is number 2 of 4 webcasts in our special revision workshop series. So if you missed the first one, don't fret, it's still available. Catherine, actually, I think our producer is going to post a link in chat so you can watch that at any time. You can watch any of the 4 at any time, actually, but we'd love you to come here and be with us in person. I think that makes a big difference, and we have certain kinds of in-person interactive things to take advantage of as well. And I love the first webcast, so I'm going to plug it a little bit because Jessica and Christina, provided such a great game plan. And what I loved about it was like all these very actionable steps. It was all like very, very methodically planned out with a level down revision method that takes writers from story level revision to scene level to page level revision. And then it was great to see how all of the tools in Fictionary supported that level down approach. So we're going to dig in even deeper this week, and we have our 2 revision experts here with us who I want to introduce. Jessica Brody is the author of more than 20 novels, so she knows a lot about revision. Several of those novels were penned during NaNoWriMo. She's also written the very popular, I see this all over the place on Instagram from NaNoWriMo writers, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, that helps you not only prep to write a novel, but also it's a good revision tool too. And she's the founder of the Writing Mastery Academy. She's worked with editors at all the major publishing houses, and she's helped more than 100,000 writers through her online courses and webinars. I just want to mention her NaNoWriMo middle grade novels include I Speak Boy and Amelia Gray's Almost Okay, and they were published by Penguin Random House. And then her NaNoWriMo young adult novels include The Geography of Lost Things, I love that title, and Between Burning Worlds, which have been published by Simon & Schuster. Yeah. And Christina Stanley is also a NaNoWriMo writer. She's written best-selling novels. We're always proud to have our writers publish their novels, and especially when they become bestsellers. Christina is a unique writer in that she has a degree in computer mathematics. And between that and being a writer, I think that all combines into Fictionary. And she's CEO and founder of Fictionary. She'll tell us more about that. She is the story editing advisor to the Alliance of Independent Authors and was on the board of the directors for the Story Studio Writing Society. And can't wait to hear more about Fictionary. It's such a wonderful tool. And on that note, I want you guys, everybody, we have these wonderfully generous special offers from both the Writing Mastery Academy and Fictionary to help you with your revision. And they also help NaNoWriMo because 30% of the price of the services go to NaNoWriMo to help us put on webcasts like this and help you with your novels. So Jessica, can you tell us a little bit more about your special offer?
Yeah, actually, I have a slide I can show you.
Cool.
That will tell us everything we need to know. One second, let me get that up. So actually, why don't you go first, Christina? Do you want to tell us a little bit about Fictionary?
Sure, I would love to. Do you want to put that in full screen, Jessica? We're seeing your whole thing on the bottom so everybody can read it.
Oopsie, one second.
If people could read ahead there, they'll see what's coming.
No peeking. There we go.
Yeah, so Fictionary is software for writers and editors. And I built that because I was having extreme trouble editing my own novels. And I wanted a tool that helped me at the story editing level with structure, characters, plot, and setting. One of the reasons we're here today is Grant very kindly introduced me to Jessica early last fall. And what we discovered is Jessica has the courses in the Writing Mastery that teach all the theory that you need to revise your own story. And I've got the tool that you can do it in. And the crazy thing about it, having never met before, is how closely the 2 programs map together. And so Grant talked to us about doing a joint program to help everybody who's writing at NaNoWriMo, and of course has a draft novel and what the heck do you do with it. So super excited to be here. Fictionary really is about planning and organizing your revision. We have tools that we'll talk about, like the story map. We've got story elements on a per scene level. We've got the story arc, which draws automatically for you so you can see if your key points are in the right place. And then we have special discounts for Nano. And so I'm sure there'll be a link posted to head to our page for that, but please take advantage of it. We have a 2-week free trial, so you can come risk-free and just test it out. You're muted.
Thank you. As Christina said, the Writing Mastery Academy is a place you go to learn and improve your craft. We have over 10 writing courses that you can stream on demand, and your membership comes with unlimited access to that. It's over 100 hours of content on all sorts of things like revision, fast drafting, plotting, save the cat, all those things. So it comes with my complete novel revision course, which the stuff I'm teaching in this webinar series comes straight from that course. So if you want to dive deeper into the course, that is there. We also do monthly live webinars with experts, which you get unlimited access to that, plus the access to all of our recorded webinars. We have like over 30 now. So you can go back and look at different topics that you've missed. We have a thriving writing mastery community where we do virtual meetups and coffee chats and all sorts of fun things there. And just like Christina said, there is a discount for NaNoWriMo, and it's 30% goes back to NaNoWriMo. So please explore. And we also have a free preview if you want to take a look at some of the courses and see if they're right for you before you join.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Jessica and Christina. And just wanted to plug one more thing before we dive in, and that's the NaNoWriMo Revision Challenge, which is happening right now during the month of February. And it's doing our I Wrote a Novel Now What months that are happening right now. And the revision challenge is it's the same as like signing up and doing NaNoWriMo, writing 50,000 words in a month. When you go to create a new project on a site, our site website, click associate with the NaNoWriMo event. And then you'll choose the Now What 2022 option to officially be a part of the challenge. And the challenge is, you know what, we were like, we don't know exactly the right how to frame this challenge. This is all new to us, so we're experimenting. So the challenge is to revise 150 pages during the month of February. So let's see if that's possible. We'd love to hear your feedback, but go for it, along with the support from Christina and Jessica. And I believe Catherine's going to post a link in the chat as well to tell you more. But just before we start, just a couple meeting logistics. Jessica and Christina are going to give an amazing, interactive, fun, funny presentation, right? All that?
No pressure.
Good. Okay, and more. I think there's dancing, tap dancing, and maybe, I don't know, some ventriloquist action, maybe. So they're going to do that for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to take questions. So put your questions in chat, and we'll try to answer them all. And with that, I am going to hand it over to our revision experts.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant. So this 150-page challenge actually comes at a perfect time because we are going to be giving you guys an assignment to go and do your story level revision, which definitely fits in with this challenge. And I have to give props before we start. I have to give props to Christina because she volunteered bravely to show the novel that she's revising as we go through the steps today. And I just think that's really brave of you.
I'm a little scared, but it's okay. I can do it.
But it's going to be awesome because it's really going to show you how these steps apply to an actual novel and some problem areas that I think Christina has identified in her novel and that she's going to fix. So let's get into it. Okay, so we are today doing the story level revision, also called the developmental edit. Now, if you missed the last workshop, you can definitely still watch this. There are some things that might not make sense or that you might not be able to follow all the way through, so be sure to watch that replay on YouTube to get caught up and do the steps that we laid out in the last workshop so that you're ready to do the steps in today's workshop. So part 1 does cover a lot of important foundations for the steps we will be taking in today's workshop. So just want to remind you all, and once again, if you haven't already downloaded our free revision Kickstart guide, this walks through all the steps we did last week and the step we're going to do today. So that will get you also up to speed if you want to check that out at writingmastery.com/now-what. Okay, so we already did this. By the end of today, here's what we're going to do today. And hopefully we're going to this will get you excited because we have a lot to get through, but it's going to be great. By the end of today, you are going to have a proven method for building your story level revision plan. You're also going to have what are called key checkpoints. Those are things that are going to help you analyze your first draft for common problem areas. Because it's one thing to just say, okay, I'm going to revise the story level. What am I looking for? So we're going to give you 5 key checkpoints to look for to help you analyze that novel and evaluate it yourself. We're also going to give you some strategies for revising those problem areas out of your next draft. We're going to show you how you can use Fictionary to build your revision plan and your storyboard so that you are ready to go and you can revise with a plan. And then obviously you're going to leave today with some more confidence. We're all about giving you all the confidence we can, that you're taking the right steps and doing the right tasks to make your next draft amazing. So remember, this process is all about organization. It's all about keeping you feeling confident, in control, organized, on top of it. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is helping you take those next steps so that when you start to revise your next draft, you feel all of those great emotions. So just a quick recap. We talked about the level down revision method consisting of the story level, then the scene level, then the page level. So today we will be focusing only on the story level revision, and that's the only revision you should be tackling for your next draft. So these are story level issues that we're looking for. And just a reminder, the story level is the big picture stuff, like looking at your story from the International Space Station, only moving around those big pieces, those big continents and mountain ranges, not the nitty gritty stuff. So we're looking at structure, plot, character development, character arcs, world building, and pacing. And we're going to talk about those things today. So last week, we had you do a complete hands-off read-through while you took notes. We had you organize your ideas into revision levels, and we had you create your first draft storyboard. Christina, did you do your homework?
Yes, Jessica, I did my homework.
What did you find?
I knew I was going to have to answer to you. So I did my homework. So I went through my entire novel in Fictionary, and I'm just going to start everyone off here in the story map on our visualize page. And so last week I showed you a little bit of how to get around the app and to do things. This week, we're just going to focus on what it means to you as a writer. We have lots of videos on YouTube that you can look at that show you how to do each step. And also we have videos right inside the Writing Mastery course. So if you're there and working on it, you can see exactly how to do these steps that we're talking today. So those are great videos for anyone who wants to dive a little deeper. So on my homework, I went through and I named every scene. I listed what happened in the middle and what the scene climax was. And what this is giving me is through my whole novel, I can see this is my opening image. And yes, I put the Save the Cat words up here because I want to see how my story maps to Save the Cat. So in this scene, there's an offer on a house. In the middle, one character is putting pressure on the other to buy the house. And at the end, they have to make a decision because there's other people waiting to make an offer. So this gives me a full view of my entire story anytime I want to check. And one just little thing I'll say here is I've selected the elements that I want to look at here, so I don't have to look at all of them. And then that helps me really focus in on right there. I just want to be looking at my storyboard. So if we remember also from our homework, I went through all of my scenes in my hands through read through. I didn't touch anything, Miss Jessica. I left alone. And I put my story level revisions, my scene level revision tasks, and my page level revision tasks. So I broke them all out and I can actually see what they are. And so that is my starting point for today.
Yay, good job. A+ for you.
Yay.
Okay, so hopefully you all were able to do your homework as well. I hope you have your storyboard ready to go. Your first draft storyboard is obviously very important because it is the starting point. And obviously you can see what's coming next. If you built your first draft storyboard, the next step is to build your second draft storyboard. So, oops, I forgot all of those things. Well, that's fine. So just a reminder, your first draft storyboard is a snapshot of what your story looks like before you revise, made up of short scene descriptions like the ones Christina showed us, and it's also called a story map in Fictionary. It can also be created with index cards, Post-it notes, Trello, or obviously with Fictionary. Okay, so next up, we are going to be creating your second draft storyboard. The second draft storyboard is a snapshot of what you want your manuscript to look like after you're finished revising the next draft. So essentially, it is the heart of your revision plan. This is what you are planning to do in your revision. And remember, we're all about planning. We're all about keeping organized. So we always know where we are. We always know what kind of work there is to be done. So this gives you an end goal to work towards. If you just start revising, you just open your manuscript, start revising, you kind of have no idea where you're going. You have no idea what you're trying to accomplish. This really solves that problem. It helps you keep track of what parts of the story need to be added because they're missing or they're not working, deleted because they just don't need to be there, they're unnecessary, or revised. So you're going to find that there's different parts of your story that need to do one of these things. Then you need to add things, you need to delete things, or you need to revise parts. And this storyboard will be your snapshot of all of that work. So you can always tell where you are. The thing that I love the most about the storyboard, though, is it allows you to play out different ideas and scenarios to see how it will affect the whole story before doing any revisions. So we could get an idea for like, oh, I want to move this scene here. We can open up our manuscript, we can start moving, and then we can realize, oh, this is going to change this and this is going to change this. So I'm going to go fix that. And oh, that caused that problem. So I'm going to go fix that. And before we know it, we're overwhelmed and we're out and we're disorganized. We don't know, even remember where we started this whole rabbit hole. I call those revision rabbit holes, by the way. So by playing the idea out on your revision board, on your storyboard, you can start to see how those threads are going to change. You can start to see what other scenes are going to need to be revised in order to make that work. And you can undo it if you want, because it maybe doesn't work in the end. But instead of doing all that rewriting, you're doing it on the storyboard. This saves a lot of time in what's called the endless rewrite. That's when you just keep going, rewriting in circles. And this really helps diminish that endless rewriting. One word of warning before you create your second draft storyboard, make sure you create a copy of your first draft storyboard. You always want to remember what you had. So if you're using index cards, you're going to want to recreate all those cards, or just take a picture of the board you had. If you're using Fictionary or another digital program, you can save a new draft, and Christina will probably tell us how to do that. Okay, so how do we build our second draft storyboard? Let's talk about the steps required to do this, because it is going to be the heart of our revision plan, so we definitely want to do it well. We are going to be using what I call checkpoints to identify common problem areas in your draft. Because like I said, it's one thing to say, I need to fix stuff. It's another thing to say, what do I need to fix? These checkpoints will help you determine what you need to fix. Then we're going to be brainstorming ideas on how to fix the problem areas we found, and adding those ideas to the storyboard. Finally, we're going to be finalizing the storyboard so we have a nice, solid, finished storyboard and plan for what to do in our actual revision when we sit down to start revising. So these are the 3 steps we're going to talk about today. Let me dive a little bit deeper into the first 2 steps, and then we're going to show you those checkpoints. Christina's going to use them to revise her own novel or create her own storyboard, so you can really see them in action. So step 1, use those checkpoints to identify problem areas in your first draft. What is a checkpoint? Okay, a checkpoint is a question you ask yourself to help you identify common problem areas in your draft. So there are a lot of things you can look for in a draft. Today, we're going to talk about the 5 most common problem areas that writers find in their first drafts. We can't possibly explore them all because that would take 5 hours or maybe longer. So we'll talk about the top 5. So these are the checkpoints we're going to go through today. Does my story have a solid structure? Does my hero have clear goals? Does my story have enough conflict? Does my hero have a complex and compelling backstory? And is the world of my story immersive? So here's how a checkpoint works. If you can say yes, then you've cleared the checkpoint. You don't have that problem in your manuscript. If you answer no, then you've identified a problem area and you have to drill deeper to figure out and diagnose what the problem is and what could potentially fix it. So these 5 checkpoints actually come from a full list of 18 story level checkpoints that are in my complete novel revision course. So if you want to dive into even more checkpoints and get some more in-depth detail about these 5 plus examples, you can check out the course. But those are the 5 we're going to talk about today. Then what we're going to do with each checkpoint is we're going to brainstorm fixes and add them to the storyboard. So essentially, for every problem area you identify, every time you say, no, I have not cleared that checkpoint, that means that you have identified a problem area and you need to brainstorm ideas on how to fix it. Those ideas are going to come in one of the following ways. They're going to require you to add new scenes to your story. They're going to require you to delete unnecessary scenes from your story. They're going to require you to potentially move scenes around in your story, or maybe revise existing scenes within your story, or potentially weave threads or revise threads. So that means when the change has multiple repercussions throughout the story, what I call ripple effect. So you make a change and it requires you to make further changes down the road. So those would be weaving threads. So those are the 5 action items that you'll be adding to your second draft storyboard. I like calling them action items because it just makes us feel like, yes, we're doing it, we're revising, we're being active, as all good characters should be and all good writers should be too. So these are revision action items you'll be adding to your story depending on how you brainstorm your revision fixes. Action items are essentially the building blocks of your storyboard. What do I have to do to revise this thing? What actions do I have to take? Okay, so let's get into the checkpoints. I'm going to cover the basics of the checkpoint, the theory of the checkpoint. I'm going to give you just a really generic example of how this checkpoint might work. And then Christina's going to, as I said, bravely open up her manuscript and show us how she applied this checkpoint to start building her second draft storyboard. And that's where I think the rubber's really going to meet the road, where you're going to see how these checkpoints come into play. So our first checkpoint is, does my story have a solid structure? Story structure is the foundation that holds your story together. A lack of story structure is problematic. It causes your story to feel slow-paced, unsatisfying, and unengaging, all things we don't want in our stories. But a loose or wobbly structure is completely normal for a first draft, especially if you're a pantser. So that's why it's a common checkpoint that writers can't pass for their first draft and need to work on for the second draft. I won't be getting too deep into structure here, but I recommend that you familiarize yourself with a story structure method that speaks to you, that you really like. So for example, I wrote a structure method or a book on a structure method called Save the Cat. You can check out the book, the online course, or there's also some free blog posts and YouTube videos if you want to get familiar with it. The hero's journey is a very popular structure method. And Christina actually has a structure tool, a story arc tool built into Fictionary that you can use if you're going to be using Fictionary. That's very easy to use. I think she's going to demo that. Okay, so when you get the structure method that you want, even if it's just the basic 3-act structure, the way you identify structure problems is by asking yourself questions like, does my story hit all the right beats? Like in Save the Cat would be the catalyst, the break into 2, the midpoint, the break into 3, etc., at the right moment. And do those beats serve their purpose in the most impactful way? Is this the best catalyst for my story? Is this the best midpoint for my story? For example, maybe you're going through this checkpoint. Does my story have a solid structure? And you think, no, it's a little wobbly. I've studied structure now, and I know that it's not really solid. The problem that I've identified is my catalyst, or what's called an inciting incident. It comes too late in the story, so there's really too much setup and it's starting to feel a little slow at the beginning. Okay, so some ideas for fixing that, or action items for your storyboard, would be, first, I'm going to move the catalyst earlier. Well, you can't just move a scene and expect everything else to fall into place, because those scenes are probably connected in some way. So I'm also going to have to rewrite scenes before or after the catalyst. So I'm going to want to label those scenes in my storyboard as rewrite, so that I know that when it's time to revise, those are the scenes I have to rewrite to match with the new catalyst. Christina, how did you get on with this checkpoint of story structure? Oh, we can't hear you.
unmute. Okay,
There you go.
Sorry about that. Okay, can you see my story arc?
Yes.
Okay, so obviously, I mean, I'm super proud of this. This is the magic of Fictionary. So Fictionary has analyzed my manuscript for me, and it's showing me where the key scenes are. And Fictionary, we chose to do 5 key plot points because all of the story structures that exist today, including Save the Cat, they can map down to these 5 beats. So this is the most simple form of the story arc that you can start with to see if you have a structure. So in looking at my story, I see that my inciting incident is way over here. My plot point 1's over here. And this is indicating my story is starting to drag a little bit. And I've got a couple of options. I could move plot point 1 earlier or the inciting incident later. And the climax also doesn't look quite right to me. So this is my starting point. I know I've got some structure issues with my story. And what I want to do is figure out how am I going to fix that. So what I figured out here is that my inciting incident is here. And I think I don't have enough setup and enough depth in my story to make it really valuable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new scene. And then with that scene, I want it to be first because it's going to be my new opening scene. All I'm going to do for my story map is I'm just going to put write. If I could type close enough, I can write. So I got to write this scene. So that tells me I need to write this scene. Now here, if you remember, this was my inciting incident. And on my read through, I actually decided it's not. So I'm going to turn that to no, it's not. And this is my inciting incident. So I'm going to set that as the inciting incident of my story. And I went through my notes to put all the notes in there to do this. And I also figured out, I think this scene can go at the beginning of chapter 4 to move it out here. So once I do that, you can see now this is down here. My scene is renumbered. I've got an empty scene here that I have done nothing with, except I've got to write the scene. And if I go back and look at the story arc, you'll see that there's been some changes to it. And it gives me a starting point to figure out, is my structure getting better or worse? So you can see here, this is much better. It's getting closer to the recommended blue line. So that's exciting for me. So I haven't really done anything yet. My storyboard looks a little bit different. And you'll see here, I'm using 2 versions of my manuscript, one for the first storyboard and one for the second storyboard. So I just imported it again and I'm working it. So I always have the original version in my Fictionary account for if I need it, right? I'm going to leave the climax alone for now because I want to see how, as I revise and go through this, how that changes the rest of my story arc before I do too much. All right, Jessica, back to you.
For bravely showing us that. Again, I commend you. Well, thank you for bravely showing us that again. I commend you. All right, our next checkpoint that we're going to talk about is, does my hero have clear goals? If you've heard me speak before, you know I'm a big fan of goals. I think goals are the things that solve everything. So let's talk about goals. Goals are what your hero wants and is actively pursuing in the story. So they are the driving force of storytelling. Not only do they give your characters something to do in the story, so they're not just sitting around thinking, but they give your readers something to root for or potentially root against if they don't want whoever is going after the goal to get it. So these are very valuable tools for writers to not only keep your hero and your characters proactive, but keep your reader engaged. So when we have a lack of clear goals, when we don't pass this checkpoint, it causes our story to feel unfocused because what are we really going towards? What are we moving towards? Confusing because the story tends to be all over the place when it's not focused around some clear goals. And slow. It just feels like it's lacking momentum because it's not moving toward a goal. So we can identify our goal problems and decide if it's something that we need to work on in our next draft by asking ourselves questions like, can I identify what my hero wants in every moment of the story, big or small? So a little trick that I like to do for myself when I'm testing this out is I like to pick a random page, just turn to a random page in my story and ask myself, what's the underlying goal here? Now, heroes don't have to be pursuing a goal on every single page, but there should be sort of an undercurrent of a goal that is moving the story along. And if I can't identify what that goal is, what that undercurrent is at that random page, it means my goals aren't properly set up. And there I've basically located a part of the story that's just sort of floating in space, unconnected with any clear goal thread. So goals create really good connective tissue between your scenes. The other thing you can ask yourself to identify goal problems is, are my goals tangible? So it's really easy for us to go and latch onto those intangible goals like my hero wants to be happy or my hero wants revenge. Well, what does that really mean for the hero, and how does the reader know when they've achieved that goal? So we want to try to turn those goals into something more tangible. My hero wants to avenge the murderer who killed their father because that's where they'll feel like they have gotten their revenge. So we want to kind of give it that quality that makes it concrete and tangible, or in other words, clear, so that the reader can track it and the reader knows when the goal has been achieved or lost. And that's what keeps that reader engaged and rooting for or against the goal. So for example, when you're looking at your own manuscript, perhaps you're going through this checkpoint, does my hero have clear goals? Maybe you've identified a problem area in Act 2 where the goal isn't tangible enough. You've created a sort of mushy, what I call a mushy goal, something that the hero wants, but it's not very clear to what the reader, it's not very clear to the reader, and they can't track whether the hero is making progress toward it or not. So this would be a problem area that I would want to fix, and some ideas that I could use to fix it, or action items I could add to my second draft storyboard would be, okay, I'm going to rewrite the break into two, which is a save the cat term for the moment when the hero goes onto some sort of new journey or adventure. I'm going to rewrite that scene to make that goal more concrete. So instead of the hero taking off to just get revenge, because what does that mean? I'm going to have my hero go off and actually plan out a plot, or plot out a path to that revenge, find the person that they want to, avenge, and what's their plan to get there. So that means that the hero has now a more tangible goal that the reader can track. But if I rewrite that scene, it's probably going to cause me to rewrite other scenes. So this is what I mean by a weaving of a new thread. Now I'm probably going to have to revise a lot of other scenes in Act 2 in order to keep that thread alive of the new goal. So that could be things that I would add to my storyboard as I'm tackling this problem. So Christina, how did you apply this checkpoint to your manuscript?
Okay, so let me just open up my manuscript. So here we're kind of down. I've just marked it here to show you. So I'm just past the middle plot point, which is the second half of Act 2. And I have a scene where coming out of the middle, there's not a really strong goal of changing direction or anything. So I know I need to do that. And so I've made my notes over here on, I've got to introduce a modified goal, some other notes here for other things I was keeping track of. And sorry, on the character side, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put no goal. And so I know on my story map that this is going to show for me. So I'm keeping track of, I don't have a goal here. I do, either I need to revise this scene or add a new scene here. I haven't quite figured that out yet. I've got to do that when I work on this and figure out how I'm going to do it. The thing I do have to be careful of is when I change it here, whatever I do here has to weave through the rest of my story. So I just want to take a quick look at the story map again. And the reason I want to do that is the story map is really going to become your best friend through this process. It's the tool that you can use continually as you're going through your revision process, and you can see your progress as you go. And so what's happening now is Fictionary is pulling out all of your elements that you have to date and putting it on the story map. We have a default value, but what I really want to look at is I want to get rid of all of these. Oops, sorry. Let me click properly. It's Sorry, that's me being bad here. Yeah, I want to select none. And then what I want to do is I just want to look at the goal and see what I've got. And you can see here, I haven't put anything here because that's my new blank scene. If you remember, I added a blank scene. I've done nothing. Here I know what the goal is. I know what the goal is. I have a weak goal here. I'm going to fix this one. And as I go across, either it's really clear, or I had to look a little bit and I put a description. And so you go all the way across. Once I've left blank, I still think I need to work on. And so you can see here, I've got a good indication of where I'm at. I haven't done all these scenes, so it's not completely blank all the way across. And where we were around scene 50, here's the one I added no goal. So what you end up with on the story map is really your revision tasks. And when you fix this, you're gonna put a little check mark here, or put in what you know the goal is. And then that way you can follow through the story and you also know you've done it. And then at the end, the story map's going to look beautiful with everything checked off.
Great. Okay, moving on to our next checkpoint. Let's get this. Okay, you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, our next checkpoint is, does my story have enough conflict? So goals are great, but without an opposing force against them, the story starts to feel very easy. So conflict is anything that makes stuff difficult for your characters. So these can be villains, nemesis, bad weather, bad technology can run amok. It can be really anything. It's a very general term, and it can be external or internal. So things can be going on inside your hero, inside their psyche, that also counts as conflict, anything that makes it difficult. Unfortunately, in our first drafts, we tend to have a lack of conflict. Things just tend to be really easy because we're just trying to get the story down, and we're not really paying attention to let's make sure everything that the hero does is hard. So that's something that a lot of first drafts suffer from and need revising for. So a lack of conflict makes the story feel too easy. It also gets a little boring when the hero just keeps kind of achieving things or just keeps doing things without any struggle. It also can be a problem with length. If you have a story that's too short, it might be a sign that there isn't enough conflict, so things are just happening too quickly. It also can cause the story to feel not very urgent or not very exciting. So a lot of times when there's no conflict, it means that there's no stakes, and therefore it's just not very interesting to read about. So we can identify these conflict areas. If you think that you don't pass this checkpoint of having enough conflict, you can ask yourself questions like, is there conflict for every goal I've put in, big or small? And when I say big or small, I mean saving the world. What's standing in the way of that versus I just want a cup of coffee, but the coffee machine is broken? That would be a small level goal with a small level conflict in between.
For some people, for others, it's a big small.
I guess, yeah, the coffee machine thing could be a real big problem for some. Is there an overarching conflict that spans the whole story, something that's not going to get resolved until the end of the book? That's a really important thing that we want to make sure we have in the story. And do I have a mix of both external and internal conflict? So a lot of writers, especially if they're writing a character-driven story or maybe a quieter contemporary story, they tend to have a lot of internal conflict, but not a lot of external conflict. And a lot of writers who are writing more action-driven, the stories, they have a lot of external conflict, but nothing's going on inside the character's head. So as an example, let's say I'm writing a story that I've identified where there's not enough external conflict. So the hero's dealing with a lot of demons. There are a lot of internal battles are going on, but there's not a lot going on the outside, which ends up just feeling like a lot of thinking, a lot of reflection, a lot of internal monologue going on inside the character's head. So I might brainstorm some ideas for fixing that, which would equal action items on my storyboard. Maybe I want to add a scene where I introduce a nemesis character. And a nemesis doesn't have to always be like a bad guy in a cape. It could just be, a coworker who rubs the character the wrong way, who sort of highlights some of their flaws. This can be a really organic way to bring out internal conflict and make it feel more immediate and make it feel more organically triggered when you introduce a character who just happens to trigger that exact internal conflict. So it's a great fix for too much internal conflict. Put in a character who actually, rubs your character the wrong way. So once I introduce that character, I'm probably going to want to weave them through the rest of the story. So I might want to start marking scenes where that character might appear so that I know when I go into my revision, I can see clearly where that character might appear and where it would make sense to add them or weave them through. Christina, where did you find some conflict issues?
Okay, so I'm going to try, we're at 6:40 now. I don't know. In my part of the world, it's 6:40. So I'm going to try and go very quick through this just to keep us going. So I am way late in my novel. You can see here where my cursor is. I'm at hang on, got to go back to scene 46. Of course, I'm way at the bottom of my novel, and I've got a spot that lacks conflict, and this whole scene lacks it. So my plan for this is to delete the scene, take out the relevant information, and weave it through the rest of my story, as Jessica says. However, I'm not going to delete it right now because I need to take the time to go through and see what I need out of here, what could go earlier, what could go later, what can be cut altogether. And so all I'm going to do is change the scene name here. And then, as you know, I'm going to use my best friend, the story map, when I do my revisions and look for scenes that I want to delete and what I want to do with them. So back to you, Jessica.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'll try to go quickly too. We have a lot to cover.
No, I know.
We did start a little late. I'm not going to blame Grant, but he did take some time at the beginning. So I'm just saying, Grant. Okay. Next checkpoint. Does my hero have a complete and compelling backstory? Okay. Backstory, as you probably know, is anything that happens to the hero before page 1. So anything in their backstory. Now, a lack of a complete backstory can cause your hero to feel flat and unrelatable because we can't really understand why they're doing anything because we don't know much about who they are or what's happened to them in the past. However, too much or a non-compelling backstory, meaning you're putting in a lot of backstory that doesn't really intrigue the reader in any way, can also cause your story to feel weighed down or what we call info dumpy, where you're just kind of giving the reader a lot of information that may or may not be relevant. So these are two different sides of the backstory coin, two different problems that you might identify with your backstory. So you can ask yourself questions like, can I answer why for every major decision my hero makes? So when your hero makes a decision, if you, the author, can't answer why are they making that decision, it means the reader probably won't be able to answer it anyway. And it means you might need to be spending some more time brainstorming your hero's backstory and figuring out where their motivations lie. On the other hand, it's important to also look at where you do deliver backstory to the reader and ask yourself, is it just enough to make the reader want to know more and or understand the hero's decision? So for an example of that, let's say you've identified the problem of too much backstory. So you've info dumped a bunch of backstory in the first scene. Very normal. I do it all the time. We want to get that information out of our head onto the page, but it may not be that interesting to read about. So a great fix for that would be to find ways to spread the backstory out, giving the reader little intriguing hints that just make them want to know more and leave them guessing. Because here's a huge hint about backstory. We want our readers to be figuring it out on their own. We want to be giving them just enough that it starts their brains working and it starts them thinking and guessing of what the backstory could really mean. And then as you pay it off in little pieces, the reader sees if they were right, if they were way off, but it's automatically engaging them. So we might want to revise our Act 1 scenes to spread that backstory out, and maybe even add a scene where a piece of the backstory is more organically triggered, like an event that reminds the hero of something that happened in the past. That will allow the backstory to come out a little bit more organically than if we just info dump it onto the page. And I know you have some backstory stuff you want to share with us, Christina. Oh, you're muted again.
I do, and I'm going to share the opposite issue of what you've told. So through my revision, as we talked a little earlier, I didn't have enough setup in the story. So in this new first scene, I need to add backstory about why my main character loves the love interest, so that when the crisis happens later, there's a big impact for it. And so I need to be careful that I don't overdo it and put too much here. But my plan is to start adding backstory here, conscious of what I want to achieve with that backstory, and then weave it through my story all the way down to this event where Lance cheats on her, and then it's a more emotional impact. So what I'm going to do at this point is just for my story map, I'm going to put in here backstory relationship. So I know here I want to add relationship backstory. Okay, over to you. Okay, now you're on mute.
We're really doing well here. I do love how with Fictionary, you have those spaces to label all of these things so that you can easily track where things are and what things are necessary and what we don't have. All right. Okay. Our final checkpoint that we're going to talk about today is the world of my story immersive? So I define immersive world building. I know this is a buzzy term. Here's how I define it. It's a fictional world that's presented to the reader through direct interaction and engagement with its elements, meaning that the hero or the characters are directly engaging with the world as opposed to you, the writer, just telling us about the world. So this applies to speculative fiction like fantasy and sci-fi, as well as realistic fiction. Anytime you write fiction, you are building a world for your readers. So when we don't have immersive world building, it can cause our story to feel a little bit boring because we're just sort of giving the reader information. Readers don't like to be given information. They like to earn information, meaning they like to try to figure things out on their own and engage with the world. It can cause the story to feel a little forced. And again, info dumpy, there's that word. I bring up info dumpy twice in backstory and world building because it's one of the biggest problems of first drafts. And it's absolutely normal. We are trying to get our thoughts onto the page, and they often come out in big info dumps. So now we have to figure out what to do with those info dumps and make them a little bit more interesting. So we can identify our world building problems by asking ourselves, do I introduce my biggest world building elements through either a goal, a conflict, or a stake? And I'm going to show you what I mean by that in a second. Do I introduce world building elements only when they're relevant to the story? So am I introducing only what the reader needs to know at the moment that he or she needs, or they need to read it, need to know it? Are all my big world building elements revealed organically? Meaning, is something happening in the story that gives us a reason to know what that world building element is? Okay, is the world of my story immersive example? So let's say you've identified the problem of too much info dumping in Act 1. I had all these thoughts about my world and I just got them down on the page really quick. Okay, so for example, let's say you've built a world where there's a plague running wild and everybody's getting sick. You could just tell the reader about the plague, or you could devise a scene in which you show the reader interacting with that important element. Like maybe they have a goal of getting the cure and they have to break into a lab to go find the cure because their sister is dying. That would be a way to introduce a world building element with a goal. And Christina, I know you have some world building stuff you want to talk about.
I do. And it's exactly what you're saying about having the world building be interactive. So in this scene, I've got a character who is a key character in the story, and he's getting on a boat that he's about to go to the Bahamas. It's a murder mystery, takes place in the Bahamas on a sailboat. So it should be tense. And what I've done, if you look down, I'm going to read you a little paragraph. If I can find the paragraph. Sorry. No, I've lost the paragraph. What the heck? Isn't that funny? I don't know where it went.
Wasn't it higher up? No.
No, it was right near the beginning. There we are. I don't know why I couldn't see it. Sorry. Paragraph 4. Here we go. So here's what I've done. I really I'm very excited about this boat. I want to describe it, of course, to the readers, as it's a major part of the world going forward in the story. It's almost pretty much in every scene. And so I have a character saying, basically saying, he's looking at a list and he says, so she'd made a solid purchase. He held the specification sheet in his hand: radar reflector, single sideband radio, VHF radio, water maker, generators, solar panels, life raft, and a dinghy with an outboard engine. So if you're not bored, you should be. This is really info dumping on, I want everybody to know all of this safety equipment that's on this boat. Okay, great. So what I've done here is I've given myself a note, rewrite paragraph 4 and only use the objects that are important. So there's a couple of things in here that are really important later in the story and come into play. And so maybe I could do a little bit of foreshadowing about it. Maybe I could make it a little more suspenseful, because basically I've said this boat has all the safety gear in the world. Of course they're safe, and that just de-stresses the situation. So not very good. So what I've done here is, sorry, over to here, I've put objects, rework it. So this goes up onto my story map if I need to rework these objects. And so if you go through your story and look for things like this, you can get rid of them and the story will become much better.
Okay. Thank you, Christina, so much for sharing those things you found in your own story. Again, very brave. Okay, so our last step is to finalize your storyboard. Once you work through the checkpoints, your second draft storyboard will start to fill up with those action items, whether that be new scenes, revised scenes, moved scenes, deleted scenes, new or revised threads. You'll want to record any more details about the action items, like any things that you have, any ideas you have, any things you want to go deeper into, right in your storyboard, so you keep everything in one place. Otherwise, you're always going to be looking for your notes, right? So it's a way to stay organized. So you can put your details on the back of an index card or a Post-it note. If you're using Trello, you can put it inside the card, or as Christina's been showing us, Fictionary has these built-in story elements that pretty much have everything you'd want to know about that scene, where you can actually keep track of right in those elements. Also, make sure that you're converting any other notes and ideas you have, like along the way or from your hands-off read-throughs. So remember, you had all those notes. Christina showed us some of hers. She's going to want to go through and pull out those ideas and convert them into action items. What does it take to make this idea into an actionable item in my next draft? So make sure you do convert those notes that you had. The checkpoints might even reveal some more information about the notes that you had. And of course, you can get that full list of 18 story level checkpoints in my complete novel revision course. Okay, so once you have that storyboard, now you can revise with a plan. So remember, that storyboard is your second draft action plan. It is what you're going to use to track your progress, to gauge how much work there is to be done, to keep yourself organized and on task, always knowing where you're moving toward and what the plan is. Some quick tips for when you do start to do that revision. You don't have to do it all in one draft. If you're looking at your second draft storyboard, which you now know how much work there is to be done, and you're going, oh my gosh, that's a lot, take it in stages. I'm just going to do the structural work now. Now I'm going to go back through and work on the goals. And importantly, you don't have to revise in order. You can, if there's a big section that you can see, all of these cards are marked to revise. I'm going to work on this section because I think that's going to help me stabilize the whole story, and then I can work around it. Having that storyboard helps you zoom into different areas and know what to work on when. Make sure you keep that storyboard updated as you revise. Your ideas might change. You might have new ideas of how to structure it. You can always play them out on the storyboard, but keep the storyboard updated so that you always know where you're at. Also, keep that list going of other ideas you have, the scene level revision tasks, meaning the things that are only going to affect that one scene, and those page level revision tasks, things that might only affect one page. Keep those separate, but you do want to write them down as they come to you so you don't forget. Okay, so for our next workshop, here is your next steps. Use the checkpoints that we've provided. You can watch this back as many times as you need to identify the problem areas in your first draft, brainstorm the ideas on how to fix those problem areas, use those brainstorms to build your second draft storyboard, and finalize the storyboard, also called the story map if you're using Fictionary. Then once you've finalized your board, you can revise with a plan, and it is a much more sane way to revise. You can also remember to join us on the forum to share your progress. Our next workshop is going to be in 6 weeks. So that is pretty fast to do your story level revision, but I urge you to do the best you can. Try to get that now what challenge of 150 pages in the next 6 weeks, or during the month of February, and see how far you can get by our next workshop, which is going to be our scene level revision. So this is also called the detailed edit. This is where we're going to learn how to analyze individual scenes for problems with scene structure, scene pacing, scene transitions, and scene point of view if you're writing in multiple points of view. So we'll give you some strategies and tools for revising at the scene level. All right, and there's what you're getting for if you'd like to dive deeper into Fictionary or the Writing Mastery Academy. Sorry, we had to rush through that. We wanted to get everything in, and I will turn it back over to Grant.
Thank you so much, and sorry if I did anything to delay the presentation. No, it was great. I love how methodical and action-oriented and confidence-inspiring both of all the tools you guys mentioned and the approach you mentioned. And we have some great questions I want to dive into.
Awesome.
Let us see. Sally Sperling has a very specific question about Fictionary. Does Fictionary give you the option to work with other types of story structures that Jessica mentioned, such as Save the Cat, Hero's Journey, etc., versus just the five plot point structure? How about that?
Yeah, so I was giving you a little hint on that. So how I worked through the Save the Cat structure is I did my 5 key plot points from Fictionary, and then I used my scene names and purpose of a scene to put in the other structures. So we've done Save the Cat, the Hero's Journey, whatever you like. And coming up this year, we're going to actually have templates in to make that much easier. And so right now you're basically using the scene name, the purpose of a scene, and putting it in there yourselves. But yes, that is coming.
And I will say I've looked at the story arc in Fictionary, and the points that she labels maps directly to Save the Cat. So the inciting incident is the catalyst. Plot point 1 is the break into 2. Plot point 2 is the midpoint. Is that right?
No, the middle is the middle.
And the middle is the midpoint. Plot point 3 is the all is lost, or 2 is the all is lost. Yeah. So if you read the descriptions of we actually did a blog we put up with Jessica's permission on Fictionary that you can see we've mapped out fully every beat within the story. Save the Cat to Fictionary, so you can see exactly how to do that.
Cool. Mary Reed asks, does this work with memoir writing?
Yes. I was waiting to see if you jump in Fictionary. Go ahead. Okay.
Yes, if it's a creative memoir in the sense that it's written in a story format. If it's a biography that you're going date with things that happen, that's a different type of memoir from a memoir that's written in a story format. And if it's a story format, then absolutely yes, it does.
Yeah, I would echo that as well for the whole level down revision process.
Yeah, I agree. Phyllis Smith wants to know, will the presentation slides be available after the presentation?
Not the slides themselves, but this whole thing is available. So you can just walk through it on YouTube and pause whenever you want. You can even take screenshots if you want, but no, not the actual slides.
Right. And we have a question here. Does Fictionary work for screenwriting?
So that's a great question. We do have people writing screenplays in Fictionary, but they're writing a story before they actually write their screenplay in screenplay format. And so it depends on yourself as an artist. If you're trying to work out the story, then you can do that. But it's not like final draft where it's giving your interior, exterior dialogue. It's a really specific format for screenwriting.
Great. Jessica, we have a very specific question about your writing process and the tools you use. I'm curious about what digital or other tools Jessica uses in tracking her drafts, and if you can share anything about that.
Wow. I am a pretty steadfast Word user. I mean, I've been writing for longer than all of these programs have been around. And so I got really into Word very early. And it's what I still use because I know it so well. Sometimes it's hard to learn new things. I love trying new programs and playing around, because if I can get my processes to work in different programs, I know that I've stumbled upon a universal process. And so I would often switch around. Like I tracked my last round of revisions in Fictionary for my middle grade that I wrote in NaNoWriMo for Amelia Gray. Because we were trying to make this program, we were trying to build this program for NaNoWriMo, and I was like, well, I need to learn Fictionary. So I put my manuscript in and I did all the steps, and it absolutely worked. I've used Trello to track my progress before. I've used the Save the Cat software to build my beat sheets. I kind of dabble around, but I always come back to Word in terms of the writing.
Mm-hmm. Editors take Word as well. Generally, that's the kind of universal. We are living in the golden age of writing tools and writing software, though. So it's like super fun. I oftentimes try different softwares out, and it's just super fun to explore and to find out what works for you.
Yeah, it's also kind of inspiring. It gives you sort of a little new boost, like, oh, everything looks different and new. I feel inspired again.
Exactly. Phyllis Smith says, I struggle with world building and memoir writing. Any thoughts about how to translate a real location, place for a protagonist in a memoir using these techniques?
Great question. I mean, anytime you're introducing a world, you have to introduce it in an organic and interactive way. So I don't think it matters if it's a made-up world or a real world. It's all about the way you present it to the reader. So finding opportunities to have your hero interact with the world. So the example I always give is like just going to the supermarket. You could say, yeah, there's a supermarket over there. It sells carrots and potatoes, and and that's really boring. It's just not interesting to read about. But if suddenly the hero has a recipe they have to make because there's a huge dinner party and they don't have potatoes and carrots and milk, and now they've got to get to the supermarket and find all those things because there's a time crunch. Now you've got goals and conflicts in order to bring that supermarket into your story, and just finding those ways to interact the world with the goals, the conflicts, and the stakes. Now the stakes are, if the dinner party doesn't go well, I'm going to lose this deal or whatever it is. That's how you do immersive world building, regardless of whether the world's real or not.
Mm-hmm. Christina, I've got a couple of very specific questions about Fictionary. So I'm going to ask them both at the same time, from two different people. One person wants to know, my project has 2 authors. Is there any way for 2 people to access the story at the same time? And then Rhonda Ford wants to know, is Fictionary upload only? Can you write the story in Fictionary?
Yes. Okay. So right now, for 2 authors at a time, I'll answer that first. You can, if you share your password, you can both write in it. You want to be a little bit careful you're not writing the same scene, but we are introducing a collaboration feature just for that. So if there is a workaround for now that you can certainly do, as long as you're comfortable sharing a password, then you can both write in the same story. And with that, we're also introducing a version of Fictionary that has comments and track changes for authors, so that if you are collaborating, you can have your comments and stuff to each other, or track changes. The second question was, we do have, you can write within Fictionary, you can start from scratch. We have a feature called New Novel. And in there, and we actually developed that because we thought we were just going to do importing only, so you have a draft. But then we had so many writers go, but I want to write my next book here, that we added it. And so what happens, the really only difference is the story arc, because you need a full draft to actually draw a story arc. Everything else draws it as you go. And then the story arc will start to draw when you have enough of a story and you've got your 5 key points plus some intermixed scenes to get it to draw. But that's really the only difference.
Cool. I'm going to give a heads up to everybody. If you have a question, put it in chat now, because I've got one more question to ask, and then we'll wrap things up. But if you have something, let me know. I think this is kind of an interesting question here, because as writers, we have to give ourselves permission for so many things in every step of the process, right? And sometimes it's easy to get to think that something has to be there, or that we have to preserve something. And so Mark Cutler asks, is it all right to change the ending in rewrite?
It's all right to change everything. I mean, sorry, I jumped on the answer, Christina.
It's a great question, though.
It is such a great question. And I loved your preface of it, Grant, because yes, you have to give yourself permission to write badly to get through your first draft. You also have to give yourself permission to let go of everything if it doesn't serve the story. And I can't tell you how many times my midpoint has changed. My break into two has changed. My whole ending has changed. My first scene has changed. Sometimes multiple times in the same draft. And I think one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself as a reviser is the ability to let go of your and quote, kill your darlings.
You know, I just want to echo that. That's a great answer, Jessica. I've edited many novels where the ending has changed because it didn't make sense for the rest of the story. And so the writer then goes back and rewrites it so it fits with the story. And I've written my own murder mysteries where I've actually changed who the murderer was when I would rethink, oh, that was just the wrong person. They didn't do it. This person over here did it. So you can change really major things in your story during the revision process. And for me, that's part of the creative, really fun part.
Yeah, exactly. I always quote, many authors have told me this, but 90% of the rough draft, Karen Russell said this, 90% of a rough draft does not make it into her final draft, so or the final version. So a lot goes out and a lot goes in. Final question here. I think this is like every writer I know has dealt with this in some way. Backstory is such a difficult thing to do. This person said, I've had beta readers read the same story and complain about too much backstory and then not enough. So how do you figure out what backstory is the perfect amount to include?
That's an excellent question. So I feel like I've already sounded like a broken record because I say this all the time. Read Six of Crows. It is like a masterclass of backstory. But what I pulled from Six of Crows is the backstory needs to read like the present story. It needs to be intriguing. It needs to have cliffhangers. It needs to have goals. It needs to have conflict, stakes. And if you treat your backstory the way you treat your front story or your present story, it will be engaging. So you wouldn't give the ending of the story right at the beginning. You wouldn't tell the reader the whole story in one scene. You would delve little pieces and always leave them wanting more, just like at the end of a chapter in the present story. That would be my piece of advice about how to do backstory well.
Yeah, and so that's super, right? And I just want to add to that, for the problem of beta readers, some saying too much, too little. My guess is the ones who are saying too much are sensitive to it, and they're picking up where there's info dumping. And so it's too much backstory in one place. So they're pointing that out for you. And the ones who are saying there's too little, it could be there's not enough backstory for character motivation. So they don't get why the characters are doing certain things. So if you can pin them down and you're finding that they're marking different places, so this is too much, this is too little, that will help. But if you can't pin them down, look for the info dumping or look for things characters are doing that you didn't put the right motivation in for the reader to believe it.
Yeah, that's great. I'll add one more thing, is that backstory also depends on the genre. I mean, compare Little Fires Everywhere with the Da Vinci Code. You know, Little Fires Everywhere is all backstory. It is a beautiful masterpiece of backstory and front story woven together. Da Vinci Code is all about right now, and he sprinkles backstory in there, but it's only really so it's what's important to the plot. But when you're writing a novel that relies on backstory, you have that challenge of making the backstory as interesting as, you know, as the front story, because it is the kind of story you're telling. So keep that in mind too, and make sure that your beta readers have the right genre expectations when they're starting your story.
Mm-hmm. Really great points. We are at time. We're even 8 minutes beyond time, but thank you for hanging in there, everybody. This was wonderful, packed with a lot of information. And you know what, to close, how about if we each mention one thing we want to remind viewers to do? And I'm going to start it off by looping back to the beginning and remind people of the I Wrote a Novel Now What Revision Challenge. And I think there's information in the chat about that and on our website. So yeah, jump in and revise 150 pages this February. How about you, Jessica?
One thing I want to remind people to do, plan. That your plan is everything. Keep it updated. Keep on top of it. It's so easy to just fall down revision rabbit holes, and as much as you can, try to come back to the plan.
Great.
I just want to remind everybody to have fun while you're doing it, right? This is a really, really creative part of the process. And everybody goes, oh, I'm editing, but it's not that. It's writing the best story possible. And for me, editing triggers different ideas. When I look at things and think, well, okay, if I don't have my inciting incident there, where could I put it and what could it do? And so it's a huge part of writing for me, and it should be fun. So enjoy it.
Yeah. And I'll just remind people, I'll do the businessy thing to remind people to have fun buying your products. And 30% of the proceeds go to NaNoWriMo so that we can keep the lights on and put on webcasts like this and help you write your stories, because your stories are so important for the world and for yourselves. So thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back March 23rd. And one more reminder, come back March 23rd. And I will not delay things. I'll be very punctual. So see you all soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.